What's your emergency?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local governments.
It was a good learning experience for a lot of us that social media is not real life.
But we have to remember the media are very rarely a target audience. They're simply that conduit.
Our words have impacts on individuals, and it may not be positive. So just being thoughtful and mindful of the words that we speak.
I think what's so interesting about this position too, and this job and this profession, is that every one of us is looking for purpose. And when we find it here, that's it.
To know is that a crisis for one is not necessarily a crisis for another.
Hey guys, I wanted to jump on here for a minute. I hope you're enjoying our content. If you could take a moment to look in today's show notes at the bottom, you're going to see a link that says support to the show. The PIO Podcast needs support to keep connecting with these amazing resources. Any amount helps. Thanks everybody. We really appreciate it. Wow, it's February already, 1 month down into 2024. For this month, I've lined up some great guests. So sit back and enjoy this episode.
Good afternoon. Today on the PIO Podcast, we have Public Information Officer Brent Weisberg from the Salt Lake City Police Department. Brent, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being on. I want to get some basics out of the way first. Let's start off with, how long have you been in the position there?
I've been with the Salt Lake City Police Department for 2.5 years now.
And how did you end up there?
So my partner is actually from Salt Lake City, and we had lived in Portland, Oregon for several years, about 10 years to be exact, and we were starting to look for new opportunities in our professional careers. And I've always wanted to go into law enforcement for communications, and I was the communications director for the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office in Portland, Oregon. And this opportunity came up. I remember I was on a bus actually headed into work when I saw the job listing here in Salt Lake for the Salt Lake City Police Department. And it was kind of that, that life-changing moment where I was like, holy crap, I have this opportunity to go to Salt Lake City. I applied for the position. I didn't think I was going to get it. Fortunately, through the course of, 2020, we all remember what happened then. Everything was delayed, including hiring practices.
Oh, yeah.
So I never heard back after I put in the application, and then things quickly evolved, and very fortunate to be here at the Salt Lake City Police Department.
So you worked for a district attorney's office in Portland. Did you have a journalism background?
Yeah, so those 10 years prior before going to the district attorney's office, I was a television news reporter in Portland, Oregon. So I started my career very fortunate to go from Washington State University, go Cougs, and where I got my degree in journalism and broadcast news. Then I went to Portland at the Fox affiliate, where I was a multimedia journalist for 3 years, then transitioned into being a regular reporter, did time on all of the day part shifts, so day shift, afternoon, and then their graveyard shift, their morning show essentially, and really had a great time. Then I transitioned over to another station in Portland, the CBS affiliate, and that's kind of where I got my interest in law enforcement, covering court and crime, and where I really learned so much about law enforcement in Portland, Multnomah County, and the state of Oregon, and really had a great opportunity meeting some very great public servants in Portland and throughout Oregon, and it was an honor to cover their story.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk statistics. How many sworn versus civilian professional staff do you have?
So we are authorized for just over 600 sworn professionals. We just got our latest numbers down. Vacant right now, we're down about 21. So, like police departments across the country, we are continuing to do our best to rebuild from the hiring woes that happened in 2020. And fortunately, we've, just like so many other police departments, have had to become innovative with our strategies of how we are going to not only recruit new officers, but also retain the great officers that we have today. And so we've been doing that in partnership with our local city council, the mayor's office, a very strategic approach to this. And for our non-sworn, we like to call them professional staff. And so we have about 100. So department-wide, we're about total, when you include our professional staff and our sworn officers, we're at about 725.
And what's the population of Salt Lake City?
So specific population, we are in the Salt Lake Valley, so it ebbs and flows. When you look at the city of Salt Lake City, we're one of those cities that increases in population during the day because we are a hub for technology industry, and so we have a lot of people coming inside to our downtown core. So that's really what makes policing in Salt Lake City unique. We have that really just a young city vibe where we have a lot of young professionals who are in the city, but we also have that really great residential vibe. But then as you expand, we have a lot of those suburbia people who are living in the suburbs. And so, the population, depending on when you look at it, if you look at it by the TV market size, it's fairly large. And so I think that's something that a lot of people, you just think that Salt Lake City is just this tiny, small little city out here in the mountains, but really we are a fast-growing city.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So let's talk about how the public relations office is staffed there at the police department. How are you staffed?
So we have one director, that's myself. I oversee and manage the entire operation. Then we have a sworn sergeant. He does the day-to-day operations. And then we're fortunate to have 3 other sworn public information officers within the squad. We also have a sworn outreach officer, and we also have a professional staff member who is our graphic designer. And I cannot say how important it is that police departments have a graphic designer. It's hugely important. So many people within our department rely on her talents.
It's an interesting thing that you bring that up because a lot of public information offices, public relations offices, and PDs, they're not well staffed. You have 4 sworn staff members that work in the office, and then you have civilian staff on top of it. That's amazing staffing for a 600-person department. That's phenomenal that they're doing that. But then they have that specialist in there that's an addition. That's great. Outstanding job.
It really is remarkable, and it's really a testament to our chief's commitment to our community. Chief Mike Brown has been committed to making sure that Salt Lake City is on the forefront of communicating with our community. And so he has often referred to the public relations unit and our outreach team as the chief's office SWAT team, right? So when there is a crisis, who often do chiefs and executives in the corporate world turn to? They turn to their public relations team because they have to manage that message out there. And that's hugely important. So Chief Brown really understands, and all of our deputy chiefs understand the importance of messaging, not only internally, but externally as well.
Let's take a quick break.
I think it would be useful at least to experiment, and I know some universities have started to experiment with this, but experiment with having, a required course maybe for all students entering the university. They used to have a course at my university, which was like here's how to go to college class, here's how to study and things like that. They don't have that course anymore, but instead of having something like that, have a course that show students, here's the history of free speech, here's how it.
So I should have asked this question before: how is it being on the other side of the camera now?
It's different. I have a great working relationship with our the officers in this department. We are a young department, so I think this younger generation of police officers and professional staff, they understand the need for communicating, and they understand the video component to it. Oftentimes when we're looking for our next PIO, the one thing that we hear in the police department is that people are afraid to get out into the camera. Well, the younger generation, growing up with a cell phone in their hand. They understand what it's like to talk to a camera. And so I've noticed in my time that barrier that used to be for people who might be hesitant to do speaking to a camera, that's not existing now. So now they're already coming in with that skill set. And so now we can work on developing them as talent when it comes to the writing, their social media platform, and how they can contribute to the work that we're doing here at the Salt Lake City Police Department.
Yeah, I agree too that is something that's far more common with the younger people because they grew up with it. I mean, let's face it, as we get older, we didn't have we had cell phones maybe, but they were bricks and they had no camera on them. So not used to that for the younger people. They all had that. What major initiatives is the Public Relations Office working on currently?
So right now we're in the process of rolling out a new crime dashboard. As you know, law enforcement, we have so much data on our hands that really tell the story of the great work of our police officers, our professional staff. And so one of the things that we have done is we have, many of the people who will listen to this podcast in law enforcement are probably aware of the old CompStat model based out of NYPD. And so we have been using the CompStat model for several years, and now we are starting to transition away from that to, as we implore our crime reduction strategy, our violent crime reduction strategy, our stratified policing. And so as we evolve in our ability to reduce crime, overall crime, violent crime in the city, we also wanted to better communicate that work and to show the great work that's happening. So we're starting to evolve away from that CompStat model to show this new crime dashboard. And so we've been rolling out that very strategically. Last week, we met with local community members to give them a preview before we suddenly rolled it out in a press conference, because we wanted to make sure that we were doing it in a way that wasn't going to catch community members off guard, because they're so used to our crime reports coming out weekly that any change they could see as potentially alarming. And we didn't want this to be an abrupt change. So we were very focused on wanting to make sure that the community had engagement. It was a great listening session. They were offering suggestions, things that, even though we thought of everything, it's always that one person in that room who was like, hey, did you guys think about this? Why don't you do this? And we're all like, that's the light bulb. Why didn't we think about that? So it's really important for us to engage with our community, and we were very pleasantly surprised with the support that we had from the community members, and it included business leaders. It included people who are in the neighborhood coalitions throughout Salt Lake City, the neighborhood president, if you will, and because they all rely on that data. And so one of the things that we're continuing to do is to evolve the use of dashboards to show what different squads are doing. We have our Salt Lake City Police Department's Police Community Response Team, which are non-sworn professional staff who can respond to low-level, non-hazardous calls for service. So a lockout or something, a lost property, damaged property, and take those reports. So our police officers can be available for higher priority calls for service. Well, since they started, they've done more than 3,000 calls, and our community members won't know that unless we share that data. So really rolling out this dashboard is going to be one of our big highlights for this year.
Outstanding. So is there AI behind that or anything like that? Is it in that data that it's creating or that gathers?
No, not yet. But we're constantly evaluating and watching how AI technology is going to be used in law enforcement. It's something that we have a really good working relationship with some of the leading privacy experts nationally. When we implemented our drone program, we met with the ACLU to talk about this program. Again, it was one of those things, and it's one of those things that I can't stress enough, is when you're going to be rolling out a major strategy or something different, to get your community engaged, talk to those stakeholders to make sure that they know beforehand. And we're all worried about making sure that, everyone wants to make sure that, you keep everything top secret. Well, I think there is that level of respect. When you reach out to someone and say, hey, I want to have a discussion with you about something we're considering, will you please keep this confidential as we work through it? you will be amazed at how many people are receptive to that confidentiality request.
People just don't want to be blindsided. They don't mind an initiative that you're maybe going to put out in a year and you're only in the infancy stage. There's nothing wrong with soliciting those, that input. And then people are they're not surprised. And if you're going to those very groups that are going to be the ones that are going to file the lawsuit to block it, and you're getting them involved, that's a great way of doing it. And that is outstanding community outreach that gets you the results that you need to have done.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of our biggest concern when we had seen the rollout for drone programs throughout the country. We were certainly not the first, we weren't the last, but we wanted to look at, through a really strategic lens of what other departments did well, what others didn't. And when we went back and looked at some of the media coverage, we saw that it was, groups and community organizations who were really fearful of that kind of that big brother, that spy approach. And so we wanted to make a commitment to our community that is not what we were going to be doing. This was going to be for emergency purposes, for life and safety issues. And it's amazing at how we've been able to deploy these drones and how successful they have been. And then just hearing from the community members who will say, that's you cut in half the amount of time it took to find our missing, loved one, because we were able to get that drone up within a matter of minutes on a call for service, which we have right now a missing person, and they're doing a grid search. And we've got 2 drones up as we speak right now, doing everything they can to find this person. So it's a really great technology.
And the best way to use it is when you're trying to help people. Outstanding. You guys, recruitment across the country is a major issue. And you already said that you had an issue in recruitment. You're down 22 officers, I think you said. What are you doing differently to recruit, or are you doing anything differently? How is that going on right now?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at is best practices throughout the country. We are very fortunate to have, as I mentioned, Chief Brown is very committed to one of our goals. We have 4 big pillars right now as we enter 2024. They are pillars that we outlined in about early 2023, late 2022 of what we wanted to do, big long-term achievements. And one of those were to fill all of our vacant positions within our sworn ranks. And so we have been doing everything we can to increase our applicant pool, but also to maintain the quality of officer that we expect here at Salt Lake City Police. And so we've worked with the mayor's office. We worked with the city council here in Salt Lake City. The mayor and city council, both of whom have been very supportive of our efforts to get fully staffed. And so that included, retention bonuses. It included hiring bonuses. We have looked at where we are going to be, because we have to be, responsible for the taxpayers' money. We can't, simply spend $25,000 on going to every single recruitment fair, or we can't go to every single event that's at the Salt Lake City Convention Center. As much as we would love to have that exposure, we have to figure out what the best strategy is. And so we've been very focused on working with our HR business partner. One of our budget requests this year is going to be for a focused, dedicated recruitment team here at the Salt Lake City Police Department that will include a sergeant and 4 officers, because that's something that we know has been detrimental to other police departments, and ourselves included, is just having a haphazard approach to recruitment. It has to be focused. It has to have a plan behind it. You can't just say the PR unit is going to do recruitment, outreach is going to do it, or our background officers are going to do it, or HR is going to do it, because they have their own duties. So just like you have your SWAT team, you have your bike squads, you have your community liaison officers, you have to have that recruitment team. And that's something the chief has recognized, and that's something that we are excited to roll out in our budget for next year as well, next fiscal year.
It's amazing how when I came on the job 28 years ago, that you would go to a police test, and there'd be 3,000 people there for one opening, or no openings. Most of them were no openings. Now you could go to a police test if you had one, and there might be 50 people there. And out of that 50, maybe 20 are qualified candidates to begin with. So yeah, it is a major challenge. And like you said, just throwing money at it is not going to solve it. And then there's the retention of the officers. I know here in the Chicagoland area, CPD is losing veteran officers left and right because of the conditions at work, the mandatory overtime, the lack of being able to take time off. And those are detrimental to their physical health.
Yep.
And that is why in the last 3 or 4 years, they've had the highest suicide rate of most of the police departments across the country because of the stress level that they're in.
It's one of those things that we are constantly keeping an eye on the health and well-being of our officers, our professional staff, including our crime lab technicians, our victim advocates, our social workers, all of whom have that residual trauma from doing this such important work here in public safety. And when we've looked at different approaches of, how do we stay engaged with these applicants? Because again, you have law enforcement across the country wooing every single person to come work for them. And so we recently sat down with a chief from South Carolina, and one of the questions she posed to us was, well, how are you staying in touch with the applicants? And our answer we thought was good. Well, we're emailing them. And she laughed. She laughed at us, and it was as she was laughing, I'm like, I know exactly what she's laughing about. We're emailing. Yeah. People these days, you and I, and many of the people on this podcast, we live by our phones, right? And when my phone has binged several times, I kind of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at it just in case something happens during this interview. But that's not the rest of us. We often forget that the rest of society isn't attached to their email. They are attached to their phone. They're attached to their text messages. They're attached to their social media DMs.
And especially the younger generation, the ones we're trying to woo in, how else do you get better in touch with them? Text them, hit them up on a direct message.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was kind of that light bulb moment where, as she was laughing at us for saying that we email them, it was, oh yeah, why are we not doing what we all do to communicate every day with our friends and family, sending DMs, sending text messages? We all have department issued phones, and so that was something that was quick to change, right? We talked with our team. We have right now, as I said, we don't have a recruitment team, but we did talk to our recruitment collateral team, those officers who are volunteering their time to go to different recruitment events. And we said, hey, give them out your cell phone number. That's okay. Like, it's okay to communicate with, potential applicants over a text message. And it was kind of that light bulb moment for everyone, because it's engaging, right? It's quick, it's accessible, it's a little bit more humanized than email. And so I think it's just one of those tools that you just have to kind of take a step back to reevaluate. We're all doing something, the same thing, trying to recruit applicants, but are we doing it the best way? Are we doing it the Salt Lake City way?
And if any, just like you, I'm sure we get hundreds of emails a day. Young people get hundreds of emails a day too for other stuff. They're not going to look. A lot of times they scroll through. I've missed emails that have been important before. Everybody does. So I mean,
absolutely.
It just is what it is.
Yep.
All right. So questions about social media platforms. What do you guys currently use, and are you exploring the addition of anything else?
Yeah, so we're on all the major ones: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X now, YouTube. Follow us at SLCPD, and we are exploring the different social media platforms that exist out there, because the other day I was actually chatting with my team. We were talking about Telegram, and we were just talking like, what is it? Because I saw I read an article about it, and we just wanted to get understanding. And one of the things that we have been, we were slow to get to TikTok because we needed to make sure that we were doing everything we could for the public record retention side of things. So we're on TikTok, but there has been some privacy concerns on that, and so we're working through those privacy issues. To make sure that we're still trying to stay engaged with the youth, and not just the youth. It's society, right? My parents, they are on social media. My nieces and nephews, the young people, they are on social media. And so as long as we can stay connected with them, we're going to do everything we can. But we also recognize that social media changes. There was that time where when it was Twitter, there was that thought of what happens if Twitter goes away. And we started to do contingency planning for that.
Well, and not only that, but not that long ago, Facebook was down for almost 24 hours.
Yep.
For those agencies that only relied solely on Facebook to get information out, they were dead in the water.
Yep.
All right, so next question. Since you've been in the public relations office, have you implemented any changes or improvements that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, one of the things that we've really looked at was trying to be a better conduit of information for our media partners out there. We wanted to make sure that, we are not a 24-hour PIO team. That is still my long-term goal, to become 24 hours within the Salt Lake City Police Department. But one of the things that we were noticing is we had, you could contact us by phone, you could contact us by email, and that was kind of antiquated. So we came up with a media request form, and it had, just forms that, just fill in your name, contact information, deadline, what you're looking for, did you have the address, the case number, because those were often things that we were seeing were slowing us down. They would be like, hey, I'm trying to get a report on a shots fired that happened, and we would have to go back and, well, do you have the case number? No, you don't have the case number. Well, do you have an address? Nope, I don't have the address. Well, do you have a time? And so we wanted to streamline that. So we created this form, and really there was some hesitation out there with our local media, because they wanted to be able to pick up the phone and call us. Well, now that we have that, it's been a great tool. We still have the phone, so they can still call, they can still email, but they can also use the media request form. And it has been great, because what I like about it is we've set it up for a push notification on our phones. So in the middle of the night, I have mine set up all the way to, so it's like an alarm. It goes off and I look at it, and if it's a critical incident, and honestly, it's going to be the media who's going to be calling about a critical incident before it's going to be our watch commander or our sergeant on scene doing that notification, because they're hearing it in real time on our scanner. And so it was something that we were really happy that went well. And it was one of those things where we met with our local media to discuss implementing it before we rolled it out. And I think it has been very successful.
Awesome. Do you guys utilize any special software to manage social media posting and gathering of information on social media?
So we have Meltwater, which many of the PIOs will be familiar with when it comes to media monitoring and social media listening. So that's huge, because there's going to be no way that if you're just looking at individual platforms that you're going to capture everything. And, we have someone on our squad, one of our PIOs, where he does still do the I'll call the antiquated search of going into the search bar and typing in SLCPD to just see what else is out there, because there are those times where, despite the great technology that these media monitoring programs and social listening programs have, there's always that one-off that might slip through the crack. And so, we try to stay on top of what's being said and what we're being mentioned and tagged in, just so we're aware of it. One of the things that we also have, I think it's hugely important, because so many people have home surveillance, doorbell cameras, is the Ring app. We're on that. When people will post, there's a stranger, or I just heard shots fired, or there's a lot of police activity, we'll get on there and say, hey, the reason you're seeing police activity in this location is because our officers are looking for someone. The guy just ran from a traffic stop. And we've really been able to do that direct to consumer information, where, it's funny, because the media will say, well, hey, we saw you posted on the Ring app. Is there anything else? And I'm like, no, if there was more, I'd put it in the Ring app because I want everyone to be aware of it. We are a very open and transparent organization. And so when there's information, we know that people want that information as quickly as possible to make sure that they're feeling safe. And so we want to provide that.
Excellent. So since you guys have been there, or I should say since you've been there, have you taken any specialized training for public information?
Yep. So been fortunate to attend many trainings that have been offered by IACP, the Major City Chiefs Association, the FBI LEDA Academy is something that our sergeant, he has just completed his master PIO through that, and just regular FEMA training as well. And I can't stress enough about how important that training is. And I think for a lot of those PIOs who have been voluntold to get into this position, whether it's something that you're interested in not, reach out to your local reporters who you develop with a trust with, or, reach out to other PIOs throughout the country and ask them about your TV presence or your radio voice presence, because I think that's what people often get so self-conscious about, is how they appear on TV. And, there are a lot of people who, especially within the PIO world, who want to help out. And so I've relied on, former reporters and former anchors in TV to say, oh, hey, will you watch this press conference and see, what did you pick up on? And often they say, well, you're sounding robotic. You're sounding, you're saying, well, based on the preliminary information so many times. And I'm like, well, I have to say that. Otherwise, that's kind of my safety net right there. Because if something changes, I can say, well, it was based on the preliminary information.
Right.
But reach out to PIOs who have been in the industry for quite some time. And they don't have to be law enforcement even. There are some really remarkable PIOs out there. I've looked to some out in Oregon who, I was working with when I was a reporter, and then as a PIO at the district attorney's office, the Oregon Department of Transportation PIO, Don Hamilton, Cam Simons at the airport, some just phenomenal PIOs out there who did a great, great job and really taught me so much. Beth Ann Steele with the FBI, Tina Jones with the Portland Police Bureau, who's now a chief over in Camas, Washington, all great PIOs. And if I'm going to rattle off some names, I feel bad for all the ones who have also taught me. So I got to get Pete Simpson out there as well.
There you go. All right. So questions about critical incident briefings. Since George Floyd, that has been something that we're now being very diligent about. How about you guys at Salt Lake City PD? Do you utilize them at all?
So we did. We've changed our practices a little bit. So in 2020, we had like many other cities across the country, kind of the policies changed. And so one of the things that changed here in Salt Lake City was the release of information related to a critical incident, and specific to any time an officer uses deadly force. And by state statute, that is defined. Critical incident is defined in Utah state law. And so we here in Salt Lake City have basically a timeline of when we have to release certain information to the community. And that includes the body-worn camera video from any officer who was on scene, not just the officer who may have used force, but any officer on scene. So there are some times where we have had to release upwards of 56 videos within 10 business days of the incident. We further have to release all of that video to certain administrators within the city within 5 days. So that makes my team have to review all of that video before it goes out, because I want to make sure that we know exactly what happened on that video, not just for the officers involved, but for every other officer. So we, it is an all hands on deck situation when we do have one of these incidents, to review that video, to make sure that we're aware of it. So I can brief the chief, the deputy chiefs, so that they can communicate to the mayor's office and the mayor and say, hey, here's what's going to be released. And so it's hugely important for us. We used to do the briefing, but now we do a very detailed news release that we push out. And depending on the situation, we will have people who may be available for interviews. Oftentimes there's, because there's so many different investigations, you have a potential criminal investigation, you have your internal, we have our community review board, police civilian review board that happening. So many different investigations that are taking place that we want to stay as neutral as possible to those, but also to support our officers and to make sure that they're doing okay.
Legislatively, you guys are required to release everything within 10 days and 5 days to administrators in the city government?
Yep. So, and this is an ordinance done by the city. So,
ordinance then. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So the Utah legislature has only defined what a critical incident is.
Gotcha.
So, if a critical incident happened in a different jurisdiction, they may proactively release or they may not release that body-worn camera video. But here in Salt Lake City, we are under ordinance.
Okay, excellent. Does your office have a strategic communications plan?
We do.
Nice. So, what are some of your goals in it? Can you give me a couple?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we're being accurate, timely with our information distribution. We want to make sure that we are transparent with our data. As I've talked about, working with that new crime dashboard, we've really focused heavily on our crisis communications strategy. I think that's what's something unique to law enforcement and public safety PIOs is that crisis communication. It's hugely important because when there is a crisis in law enforcement, it seems like there's a crisis. I take this phrase from a former PIO. It wasn't something I do, but we're kind of constantly operating in that crisis state, and it's really, we look at it, is the C in the word crisis, is it capitalized or is it a little c? And so we really try to focus on that crisis communication, making sure that when there is an incident that's going to have public interest, that we're out there. One of my things that I continue to stress to my squad, and they do a great job of it, is listening to the radio, right? If they hear something that's starting to, get their hair standing up on the back of their necks of like, hey, this sounds like it's going to be something. Well, don't just wait until something does happen. Get out on scene, because our watch commander, our sergeant, media, community members are going to immediately know, like, hey, information is being distributed, and so I think that's something we do great. We don't want to wait until something happens. We want to be ready to respond for when it does.
Excellent. Brent, is there a question I should have asked? And if so, how would you have answered it?
Oh man, no, I thought all your questions were great.
All right, well, we're going to switch into some rapid fire ones, okay?
Okay.
Texting or talking?
Ooh, texting.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, neither. I don't drink anything like coffee.
Okay.
No, I'm a water guy.
Adult drink of choice?
Oh, old fashioned.
What would be your superpower if you could have one?
Oh, superpower. Oh, that's a tough one. To read people's minds.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Both.
Place you'd most like to travel to?
Oh, I've been fortunate to travel a lot of places, and so that's a difficult one. Right now, since it's pretty chilly here in Salt Lake City, I'd say anywhere that's 85 degrees or warmer.
Not much of that in the States right now. Is there a book or an author that has had a significant impact on you?
Oh, that's a hard one. Because that is a hard one. To be determined on that one.
Okay. Guilty pleasure food?
Oh, that one's difficult. I had some arepas for lunch today, and that was pretty dang good.
Who would you choose if you could have coffee with any historical figure, living or dead?
Oh, that one's tough. I'm a ski aficionado. I love skiing. I grew up skiing. There are some phenomenal ski professionals out there, and I would love to really sit down with Billy Kidd, who's in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, just to have a chat about what it was like to be in the Olympics. And I grew up skiing in Steamboat, and just learn more about his life.
Outstanding.
And then maybe D.B. Cooper. D.B. Cooper would be, yeah.
That'd be an interesting. Where were you all this time, right?
Right, exactly.
What key points would you like our listeners to take from the interview today?
The ability to reach out to other PIOs, we are never done learning. That's one of the things that I stress upon to my team is we can always do better. Being humbled enough to recognize that, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to learn from them, to be willing to want to grow as a PIO and to continue that pursuit of always learning.
How can people reach out to you if they want to connect or follow up or maybe even look for a job?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, easy handle. You can find me on Twitter X, email me, Google for our contact information, and happy to reach out and have these conversations.
And I'll add all that in the show notes. Brent, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
That's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified on the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please give us a review. Any review is appreciated. To support our efforts with the PIO podcast, you can click on the support button in the show notes, and any donation is appreciated. Thank you.